Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a world where survival isn't just about strength, it's about cleverness, observation, and a kind of quiet genius that hides in plain sight. You find yourself surrounded by vast forests, endless plains, and skies so wide they almost feel like they're watching you back. There are no stores, no machines, no shortcuts. Just you and whatever you can understand from the land. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, at least not without learning a few things first. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I always find it fascinating where in the world these late-night journeys are reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move slowly at first. The ground beneath your feet isn't just dirt, it's information. Every broken twig, every patch of disturbed soil tells a story. And the people who came before you here, the native communities across this vast land, learned how to read those stories like a book. Not in a rushed, frantic way, but patiently, over generations. You realize pretty quickly that invention here doesn't look like what you're used to. There's no sudden eureka moment, no dramatic lightning strike of inspiration. Instead, it's a quiet process. Someone notices how water flows after rain, someone else watches how animals survive the cold, and slowly, almost invisibly, ideas begin to take shape. Take fire, for example. Not the discovery of it, that's ancient, but the mastery of it. You kneel beside a carefully prepared fire pit, noticing how it's built. Stones arranged just right, wood stacked with intention, airflow controlled without even a single metal tool. This isn't random. This is engineering, just without the textbooks. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that many Native American groups had highly specialized fire-making techniques, using tools like bow drills to generate heat through friction. It's not easy. You try it in your mind, spinning the drill, your hands slipping, smoke teasing, but never quite becoming flame. It takes skill, real skill. And then there's the odd detail that catches you off guard. Some groups could carry embers for miles, tucked carefully into bark or fungus, keeping fire alive during long journeys. Imagine that, walking for days, protecting a tiny glowing spark like it's the most valuable thing in the world, because it kind of is. You start to understand something important. Innovation here isn't about convenience, it's about continuity. It's about making sure tomorrow is possible. The wind shifts slightly, brushing against your face, and you notice how everything around you seems intentional. Nothing is wasted. Every object has a purpose, and often more than one. A tool isn't just a tool, it's part of a system. Scholars still argue whether this approach to invention, deeply integrated with nature rather than dominating it, represents a fundamentally different kind of technological mindset. And as you stand there, it's hard not to feel like maybe it does. You pick up a simple-looking object from the ground. It's shaped from stone, smooth in places, sharp in others. At first glance, it seems basic, but when you imagine using it, cutting, scraping, shaping, you realize how much thought must have gone into it. The angle of the edge, the way it fits in your hand. This is design. Quiet, refined design. And here's where it gets interesting, because this way of thinking, observing, adapting, refining, it doesn't stay in the past. It doesn't disappear. It quietly threads its way into the future. You shift your weight, looking out across the land again. Somewhere in the distance, a river cuts through the terrain, glinting faintly under the dim light. You don't know it yet, but that river will matter. Water always does. For now, though, you're still learning how to see. You notice how the air feels cooler near certain patches of ground, how the trees grow differently depending on where you stand. This isn't random, it's information. And the people who lived here long before you didn't just survive, they understood. There's a kind of humility in that, a recognition that you're not separate from the environment, but part of it, and that changes everything. You take a slow breath, letting it out just as gently. The world around you feels quieter now, but not empty. It's full, just not in a loud way. And as you stand there, at the very beginning of this journey, you realize something subtle but powerful. The inventions you're about to discover didn't come from a desire to control the world. They came from a desire to live within it. That's a very different starting point, and it's only just beginning. You drift forward, following that distant river you noticed earlier. Your steps slower now, not from exhaustion, but from awareness. The land is starting to make more sense. You begin to notice patterns, small connections that didn't register before. And soon, those patterns lead you somewhere unexpected, a field. At first, it doesn't look like much. No perfectly straight rows, no mechanical irrigation systems, no tractors rumbling in the distance. Just plants, growing together in a way that feels almost casual. But as you step closer, something clicks. This isn't random at all. You crouch down, brushing your fingers lightly over the leaves. Tall stalks rise confidently toward the sky. Corn. Wrapped around them, twisting gently like it belongs there, are climbing beans. And spread across the ground, wide leafy vines stretch outward. Squash. It looks simple, almost too simple. But this is one of the most quietly powerful agricultural systems ever created. A mainstream historical fact, what you're looking at is often called the Three Sisters, a farming technique used by many Native American societies for centuries. Corn, beans, and squash weren't just planted together for convenience, they were designed to support each other in a perfectly balanced system. You shift your weight, leaning in closer as the realization settles in. The corn grows tall, acting like a natural pole for the beans to climb. The beans, in return, fix nitrogen in the soil, essentially feeding it, making it richer and more fertile. And the squash spreads low across the ground, its broad leaves shading the soil, keeping it moist and preventing weeds from taking over. No chemicals, no machines, just cooperation. It's almost like the plants are having a quiet conversation beneath your feet. And here's the quirky detail that might make you pause. Some varieties of squash even have prickly stems, acting as a natural deterrent to animals that might otherwise wander in for an easy meal. So yes, the garden is kind of defending itself, which, if you think about it, is both impressive and a little bit intimidating. You sit back slightly, letting the full picture come together in your mind. This isn't just farming, it's a system built on relationships. Scholars still argue whether this method should be considered one of the earliest forms of sustainable agriculture as we define it today. Because what you're seeing here isn't just effective, it's regenerative. You drift forward, following that distant river you noticed earlier. Your steps slower now, not from exhaustion, but from awareness. The land is starting to make more sense. You begin to notice patterns, small connections that didn't register before. And soon, those patterns lead you somewhere unexpected, a field. At first, it doesn't look like much. No perfectly straight rows, no mechanical irrigation systems, no tractors rumbling in the distance. Just plants, growing together in a way that feels almost casual. But as you step closer, something clicks. This isn't random at all. You crouch down, brushing your fingers lightly over the leaves. Tall stalks rise confidently toward the sky. Corn. Wrapped around them, twisting gently like it belongs there, are climbing beans. And spread across the ground, wide leafy vines stretch outward. Squash. It looks simple, almost too simple. But this is one of the most quietly powerful agricultural systems ever created. A mainstream historical fact, what you're looking at is often called the Three Sisters, a farming technique used by many Native American societies for centuries. Corn, beans, and squash weren't just planted together for convenience, they were designed to support each other in a perfectly balanced system. You shift your weight, leaning in closer as the realization settles in. The corn grows tall, acting like a natural pole for the beans to climb. The beans, in return, fix nitrogen in the soil, essentially feeding it, making it richer and more fertile. And the squash spreads low across the ground, its broad leaves shading the soil, keeping it moist and preventing weeds from taking over. No chemicals, no machines, just cooperation. It's almost like the plants are having a quiet conversation beneath your feet. And here's the quirky detail that might make you pause. Some varieties of squash even have prickly stems, acting as a natural deterrent to animals that might otherwise wander in for an easy meal. So yes, the garden is kind of defending itself, which, if you think about it, is both impressive and a little bit intimidating. You sit back slightly, letting the full picture come together in your mind. This isn't just farming, it's a system built on relationships. Scholars still argue whether this method should be considered one of the earliest forms of sustainable agriculture as we define it today. Because what you're seeing here isn't just effective, it's regenerative. The soil doesn't get depleted over time, it improves. That's not something you see everywhere. You glance around again, imagining what this would look like across a larger landscape. Entire communities relying on this system, season after season, generation after generation. No need to constantly move or exhaust the land, just careful balance. And suddenly, modern farming starts to feel a little loud by comparison. You reach out again, this time gently lifting a bean vine, noticing how naturally it wraps around the corn. There's no force here, no tying or guiding, it just knows what to do. There's something oddly calming about that. And then you realize this idea didn't just stay here in this quiet field. It traveled, it evolved. Today, scientists and farmers around the world are rediscovering the benefits of companion planting, pairing crops together so they support each other, reduce pests, and improve soil health. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? You smile slightly because it should. It's the same principle you're looking at right now, just repackaged with modern terminology and research papers. You stand slowly, brushing the dirt from your hands. The air feels warmer here, alive with the subtle energy of growth. There's no rush, no urgency, just a steady rhythm. And maybe that's the point. You start walking again, leaving the field behind, but the idea stays with you. This quiet understanding that sometimes the best solutions aren't about adding more, they're about working with what's already there. You pass by another patch of land, this one less organized but still thriving. It reinforces the same lesson. Nature isn't chaotic, it's complex, and if you take the time to understand it, it will meet you halfway. There's a kind of wisdom in that. As you move forward, the light begins to shift slightly, casting longer shadows across the ground. The river sound grows louder again, pulling you onward. You don't know exactly what you'll find next, but you're starting to trust the journey, because now you're not just walking through this world, you're learning how it works, and more importantly, why it works. You take one last glance back at the field, the corn standing tall, the beans climbing patiently, the squash spreading wide like a quiet guardian. It doesn't demand attention, it doesn't try to impress you, it just works. And somehow, that makes it even more remarkable. You turn forward again, following the path as it gently curves along the riverbank. The sound of water mixes with the soft rustle of leaves, creating that steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. There's more to discover, more ideas waiting quietly in the landscape, and you're just getting started. You follow the river now. It's steady, soft, rhythmic, almost like it's guiding you somewhere. The zameen beneath your feet grows slightly damp, cooler, and you notice how the trees begin to thin just enough to reveal the almat stretching ahead. It's calm, but not still, always moving, always going somewhere. And that's when you see it. At the edge of the riverbank, resting lightly as if it could drift away at any moment, is something that doesn't quite look like a boat, at least not in the heavy, wooden sense you might expect. It's too smooth, too light, almost delicate. You step closer. It's a canoe. But not just any canoe. This one is crafted from birch bark, its surface pale, slightly curved, stitched and sealed with the kind of care that feels almost artistic. You circle around it slowly, noticing how thin it is, yet somehow strong, flexible but structured. It shouldn't work, and yet it clearly does. A mainstream historical fact, birch bark canoes were widely used by many Native American tribes, especially in the northeastern regions of North America. These canoes were incredibly lightweight, light enough to be carried over land when needed, yet durable enough to handle long journeys across rivers and lakes. You pause, imagining yourself lifting it. Surprisingly manageable. That's the first thing that stands out, because in your world, boats are heavy, complicated, built with layers of machinery and materials. But here, this is minimalism at its finest. And yet, it's not primitive, it's precise. You run your fingers gently along the edge, noticing the stitching, roots carefully split and threaded through the bark. No metal nails, no industrial glue. Instead, natural resin seals the seams, keeping water out. And here's a quirky detail that might make you blink twice. The bark used for these canoes was often taken in large sheets from birch trees without killing them. The tree would continue to live and grow, meaning the resource could be used again in the future. So yes, even the boat building process was sustainable. You straighten up slightly, looking out over the water again. Suddenly, the river doesn't feel like a barrier anymore. It feels like a road, and that changes everything. Scholars still argue whether these waterways served as the earliest large-scale transportation networks in North America, because when you think about it, rivers connect vast distances, entire regions, and with something like this canoe, those distances become manageable. You imagine stepping inside. Carefully, you lower yourself into the canoe, feeling it shift slightly beneath your weight. There's a moment of hesitation, your brain reminding you that this looks too fragile to trust. But then it steadies. The design holds. You grab a paddle resting nearby, dipping it into the water. The movement is smooth, almost effortless. The canoe glides forward with a quiet grace, barely disturbing the surface. No engine, no noise, just you and the water. It's strangely calming. As you move along the river, you begin to understand why this design worked so well. The shape cuts through the water efficiently, reducing resistance. The lightness allows for quick adjustments. It's not about overpowering the environment, it's about moving with it. There's that idea again. You glance down at the surface, watching ripples spread outward from your paddle. The reflections shimmer slightly, broken only by your movement. It feels peaceful. And then it hits you. This concept, lightweight, efficient, adaptable, it didn't stay here. It influenced future designs in ways that aren't always obvious. Modern kayaks, recreational canoes, even certain aspects of boat engineering trace their roots back to ideas like this. It's easy to forget that, because when something becomes part of everyday life, we stop asking where it came from. You slow your paddling, letting the current carry you for a moment. The river bends gently ahead, disappearing behind a cluster of trees. You don't rush it. There's no need. You notice how quiet everything is out here. Not empty, but balanced. The kind of quiet that lets you think without forcing you to. And maybe that's why inventions like this feel different. They don't demand attention, they earn it. You reach out, letting your fingers trail lightly in the water. It's cool, refreshing, grounding in a way that's hard to explain. You're not just observing anymore. You're part of the movement, part of the system. And that's when you realize something subtle but important. This canoe isn't just a tool, it's a connection between land and water, between places that would otherwise remain distant, between people, ideas, and possibilities. You sit back slightly, letting the paddle rest across your lap. The canoe continues to glide, steady and sure, as if it knows exactly where it's going, even if you don't. The trees begin to open up ahead, revealing more of the river, stretching further than you can see. It's not overwhelming, it's inviting. You take a slow breath, feeling the gentle sway beneath you, the quiet rhythm of water against bark. There's something almost hypnotic about it. And for a moment, you forget about everything else. No noise, no rush, just movement. Simple, intentional, effective. You pick up the paddle again, dipping it back into the water with a soft, practiced motion. The canoe responds instantly, gliding forward as if it's an extension of you. And maybe that's the point. The best inventions don't feel separate. They feel natural. You continue down the river, the world unfolding quietly around you, knowing that somewhere ahead there's another idea waiting, another piece of this larger story, and you're getting better at seeing them now. You guide the canoe gently toward the riverbank, the Pawnee growing quieter as you near the edge. The hull brushes softly against the shore, and you step out carefully, your feet sinking just slightly into the cool earth. For a moment, you pause, letting your balance return, letting the stillness settle in again. The river continues behind you, but now your path turns inland. The air feels different here, colder, not just a little chilly, but sharp, the kind of cold that creeps in slowly and then suddenly makes itself known. You pull your arms in slightly, instinctively trying to hold on to warmth. The ground beneath you begins to change too, becoming softer, lighter. And then you see it. Snow. At first, it looks almost peaceful, a smooth white blanket stretching across the earth, untouched and quiet. It gives everything a kind of softness, like the world has been gently muted. But the moment you take a step forward, that illusion breaks. Your foot sinks deep. You try again, same result. Each step feels heavier than the last, your legs working harder just to move a short distance. It's exhausting, inefficient, and honestly, a little frustrating. You stop, catching your breath, looking out across the endless stretch of white. This isn't just inconvenient, it's a problem. And that's when you notice them. Resting against a nearby tree are what look like oddly shaped frames, long, slightly curved, with a webbing stretched tightly across them. They don't look like much at first glance, but something about them feels purposeful. You step closer. Snowshoes. A mainstream historical fact, snowshoes were developed and used by many Native American tribes, particularly in northern regions, allowing people to travel across deep snow without sinking. By distributing body weight over a larger surface area, they made winter movement not just possible, but practical. You pick one up, turning it slightly in your hands. It's surprisingly light. The frame, often made from bent wood, curves upward at the front. The webbing, crafted from rawhide or plant fibers, is tightly woven, creating a supportive surface. It's simple, but it solves everything. You sit down, fastening them onto your feet with careful movements. There's a moment of adjustment as you stand again, your balance slightly off. But then you take a step, and this time you don't sink. You take another step, then another. It works. You let out a quiet breath, something between relief and quiet amazement, because what felt impossible just moments ago now feels manageable. That's the shift. And here's a quirky detail you might not expect. Different regions had different snowshoe designs. Some were long and narrow for speed, others wide and rounded for better flotation in deeper snow. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It was tailored, refined, adapted to specific environments, which means this wasn't just an invention, it was a system of designs. Scholars still argue whether snowshoes represent one of the earliest examples of biomechanical efficiency, tools designed specifically to work with the human body's natural movement. Because when you walk now, it doesn't feel awkward for long. Your stride adjusts, your rhythm returns. You move forward again, this time with a steady pace. The snow crunches softly beneath you, but it doesn't resist the way it did before. Instead, it supports you. There's something deeply satisfying about that. You glance around, noticing how the landscape feels less intimidating now. The same environment that slowed you down, drained your energy, made every step a struggle, has become something you can move through with ease. All because of one idea. You keep walking, your breath visible in the cold air, rising and disappearing just as quickly. The silence here is deeper than before, softened by the snow, absorbing sound instead of carrying it. It feels almost dreamlike. But you know better now. This isn't just beauty, it's challenge. And the people who lived here didn't avoid that challenge, they adapted to it. You think back briefly to the canoe, to the way it worked with water instead of against it. And now here you are, moving across snow using the same principle. Not forcing, not fighting, just understanding. You step over a small drift, your movement smooth, controlled. The snow flexes slightly beneath your weight, responding to each shift in pressure. They're not rigid, they're responsive, and that makes all the difference. You pause for a moment, looking out across the white landscape. It stretches endlessly, but it no longer feels impossible. It feels open, accessible, and that changes your perspective entirely, because suddenly winter isn't a barrier, it's just another path. You adjust your footing slightly, continuing forward, your pace steady now. There's a quiet confidence in your steps, a sense that you're beginning to understand how these innovations fit into something larger. They're not isolated ideas, they're responses to environment, to necessity, to life itself. You take a slow breath, the cold air filling your lungs, grounding you in the moment. The world around you remains still, but you're moving through it now with ease. And as you continue across the snow, leaving a trail of wide, patterned footprints behind you, you realize something simple but powerful. The right idea doesn't just make things easier, it makes them possible. You keep moving, the rhythm of your steps now steady, the soft crunch of snow beneath your snowshoes almost hypnotic. The cold still lingers, but it doesn't bite the same way anymore. You've adapted, just enough to keep going. And then, in the distance, you notice something. At first, it's just a shape, a faint outline against the Safed landscape. But as you get closer, it becomes clearer. Tall, cone-shaped structures rising from the ground, their forms sharp yet elegant, like they belong exactly where they stand. You approach slowly. These are teepees. Simple at a glance, but the more you look, the more you realize how intentional every detail is. Wooden poles lean together at the top, forming a cone shape, while animal hides or fabric wrap around them, creating a shelter that feels both open and enclosed at the same time. You circle one carefully, noticing how it faces a particular direction. That's not random. A mainstream historical fact, teepees, or teepee, were widely used by Plains Native American tribes, designed specifically for a nomadic lifestyle. They were easy to assemble, disassemble, and transport, perfect for communities that moved with the seasons or followed buffalo herds. You pause, imagining the process. Setting this up wouldn't take days, not even close. With experience, it could be done in under an hour. The poles are arranged, the pushish wrapped around, the structure secured, and just like that, you have a home. Portable, efficient, reliable. You gently lift the edge of the entrance and step inside. The air changes immediately. It's warmer, still, protected from the wind outside. The space isn't large, but it feels comfortable, intimate in a way that makes sense. Your eyes adjust slowly, taking in the interior. At the center, there's a fire pit, and above it, an opening at the top, the smoke hole. You glance upward, noticing how the flaps can be adjusted. Open them slightly, and smoke escapes. Close them more, and heat is retained. It's a natural ventilation system. No fans, no chimneys, just design. And here's a quirky detail that might surprise you. The shape of the teepee actually helps it withstand strong winds. The cone-shaped structure allows wind to flow around it rather than push directly against it, making it incredibly stable, even in harsh surroundings. So yes, it's not just a shelter, it's engineered. Scholars still argue whether the teepee represents one of the earliest examples of aerodynamic architecture, because when you think about it, modern tents, certain wind-resistant structures, even some eco-friendly housing designs, they echo this same principle. You sit down for a moment, feeling the warmth from the fire gently spread through the space. Outside, the cold continues, the snow stretches endlessly, but in here, there's comfort, safety. You run your hand lightly along the interior surface, noticing how everything serves a purpose. Nothing extra, nothing wasted. Even the arrangement of the space feels intentional. Sleeping areas, storage, all arranged in a way that maximizes efficiency. It's not cluttered, it's considered. You think back to the earlier inventions you've seen, the three sisters, the canoe, the snowshoes. There's a pattern forming now, one that's becoming harder to ignore. Mobility, adaptability, balance. These aren't just sluchai themes, they're core ideas. You stand slowly, walking toward the entrance again. As you step outside, the cold air greets you once more. But it doesn't feel as harsh, not after what you've just experienced. You turn back, looking at the teepee from the outside one more time. It stands quietly, strong yet flexible, simple yet deeply thoughtful. And then it hits you. This idea, portable living, efficient use of space, structures that can be assembled and moved easily, it hasn't disappeared. You see it in modern camping gear, in emergency shelters, even in minimalist architecture trends. Tiny homes, modular housing, lightweight tents. Different materials, same thinking. You take a few steps away, your gaze still lingering on the structure. There's something almost humbling about it. The realization that innovation doesn't always mean adding complexity. Sometimes it means removing it. You adjust your stance slightly, the snowshoes shifting beneath your feet. The wind picks up just a little, brushing past you and flowing around the teepee effortlessly, just like it was designed to. It works, not because it's complicated, because it understands the environment it exists in. You take a slow breath, letting it out as you turn forward again. The path continues, leading you beyond this quiet cluster of shelters, deeper into the landscape. There's more to learn, more connections to uncover, and as you walk away, leaving the teepee standing calmly behind you, you carry that idea with you. The best designs don't fight the world, they fit into it. You leave the quiet shelter of the teepee behind, your steps steady, your breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. The land begins to shift again. Less snow now, more exposed ground, patches of trees, and a subtle warmth returning to the Hawa. It's gradual, almost unnoticeable at first, but then you smell something. Not smoke, not earth, something slightly sharp, almost sweet, but not quite. You follow it, through a cluster of trees, across a narrow stretch of the earth, until you come to a place that feels different. There are markings here, cuts in bark, containers placed beneath certain trees, and scattered tools that look both simple and deliberate. You kneel down, picking up one of them. It's coated in a sticky substance. Rubber. That realization doesn't come instantly. It creeps in as you roll it between your fingers, feeling its elasticity, the way it stretches slightly and then returns to form. It's not exactly like the polished materials you know today, but the essence is there. Alive. Flexible. A mainstream historical fact, long before industrial production, many Native American cultures, especially in Central and South America, were using natural latex from rubber trees to create waterproof materials, balls, and even footwear. This knowledge existed centuries before large-scale rubber manufacturing began in Europe. You glance toward the trees again, noticing how the bark has been carefully tapped. Sap flows slowly, collected with patience. There's no rush here, just process, understanding. You stand up, walking a few steps as you examine the substance again. It's slightly tacky, leaving a faint residue on your skin. You imagine shaping it, heating it, forming it into something useful, and that's exactly what was done. Waterproofing fabrics, sealing containers, creating objects that needed to bend without breaking. It's such a simple idea, and yet it changes everything. Here's a quirky detail that might catch you off guard. The famous rubber balls used in ancient Mesoamerican games were so well made that they could bounce, something that amazed early European observers who had never seen anything like it before. Imagine that moment, seeing a ball hit the ground and come back up. It must have felt like magic, but it wasn't magic. It was material science, just without the lab coats. Scholars still argue whether these early uses of latex should be considered the foundation of modern polymer science, because when you strip away the advanced chemistry and industrial processes, the core idea is the same: taking a natural padarth and transforming it into something with entirely new properties. You walk slowly now, your mind turning over the possibilities. Rubber isn't just one invention, it's a gateway. Once you understand how to manipulate materials like this, the potential expands rapidly. Flexibility, durability, resistance to water. You glance down at your feet, imagining footwear enhanced with this material, better grip, protection from moisture, comfort. It starts to connect. And then you think even further ahead, though you try not to rush the journey. Tires, seals, countless modern objects that rely on rubber in ways you barely even notice, all tracing back in some quiet way to moments like this. You kneel again, this time observing how the sap is collected. There's care in every step. Too much cutting and the tree suffers. Too little and the yield is minimal. Balance. There it is again. You stand, wiping your hands lightly, the faint stickiness still lingering. It's a small reminder, something physical, something real. You look around once more, taking in the scene. It's not loud, not dramatic, just people working with what's available, refining techniques over time, passing knowledge from one generation to the next. No factories, no mass production, and yet the impact of this knowledge echoes far into the future. You take a few steps back, letting the space settle into your memory. The trees, the tools, the quiet process, it all feels connected to something larger now. A pattern you're beginning to recognize. Observation leads to understanding. Understanding leads to innovation. And innovation doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. You turn slowly, continuing along your path. The ground feels firmer here, the hawa warmer, carrying new scents, new possibilities. The snow is now just a memory behind you. And ahead, more ideas waiting quietly in the landscape. You flex your fingers slightly, still thinking about that stretch, that bounce, that transformation. It's such a small thing on the surface, but it changes how you interact with the world. And as you move forward, you can't help but feel a quiet respect for the simplicity of it all. Because sometimes the most revolutionary ideas feel almost ordinary at first. You continue forward, the ground now dry beneath your feet, the air carrying a crispness that feels different from the earlier cold. Not harsh, just clear, open, the kind of hawa that makes every sound travel a little farther. And then you notice the slope. At first, it's gentle, barely enough to register, but as you walk, it becomes more defined, rising slightly before dropping off into a smooth, lumba descent. The surface looks compact, packed earth mixed with a thin layer of snow and frost. You step closer to the edge and look down. It's not steep enough to be dangerous, but it's definitely steep enough to move quickly. And that's when you see it. Resting nearby, half buried in snow, is a long, narrow object, curved slightly at the front, smooth along the bottom, with a shape that feels oddly familiar. You brush the snow off. A toboggan. At first glance, it's just a sled. Simple, straightforward. But as you lift it slightly, you realize how light it is, far lighter than you expected. The wood is thin but mazboot, shaped with intention. A mainstream historical fact. Toboggans were widely used by Native American peoples in northern regions as a primary means of transporting goods across snow-covered landscapes. Unlike sleds with runners, toboggans have a flat bottom, allowing them to glide smoothly over snow. You tilt it slightly, noticing the front curve. It's not just for style, it helps the toboggan ride over uneven terrain instead of digging into it. You set it down again, considering your options. Walking got easier with snowshoes, sure, but carrying heavy loads? That's a different challenge entirely. This solves that. You place a few imaginary supplies onto it, bundles, tools, whatever you might need, and then grab the rope attached to the front. With a gentle pull, the toboggan slides forward almost effortlessly. That's surprisingly smooth. You take a few steps, pulling it along behind you. It glides quietly, barely resisting, following your path with a kind of obedient ease. And then you glance back at the slope. An idea forms. You position the toboggan at the top, sit down carefully, adjusting your balance. There's a brief moment of hesitation, your brain reminding you that sliding downhill on a wooden board might not be the safest life choice. But curiosity wins. You push off. At first, it's slow. Then gradually, the guthy builds. The hawa rushes past you, the ground blurring slightly as the toboggan glides smoothly over the surface. No wheels, no engine, just gravity and design. You lean slightly, adjusting your balance as you move, realizing how responsive it is. The flat base distributes your weight evenly, preventing you from sinking, while the curved front keeps you moving forward without catching. It's controlled, efficient, and honestly, kind of fun. You reach the bottom sooner than expected, slowing naturally as the ground levels out. The toboggan comes to a gentle stop, and you sit there for a moment, letting the experience settle in. That was simple, but effective. And here's a quirky detail that might make you smile. The word toboggan actually comes from an Algonquian word, often reconstructed as otobogan, meaning something like flat sled. So yes, the name itself carries the history of its origin. You stand up, brushing off a bit of snow, and look back at the slope you just came down. It doesn't seem as intimidating now. It feels usable. Scholars still argue whether early transport tools like the toboggan directly influenced later innovations in cargo movement and sled design. Because when you think about it, the core principle, reducing friction to move heavy loads more efficiently, is something that appears again and again throughout history. Different forms, same idea. You pick up the rope again, pulling the toboggan along as you continue forward. This time, it feels like an extension of your movement, not a burden. You could carry far more this way than you ever could alone, and that changes what's possible. You imagine long journeys across snow-covered landscapes, entire communities moving supplies, food, materials, all with tools like this. No need for roads, no need for complex infrastructure, just understanding the environment and working with it. You pause briefly, looking down at the smooth surface of the toboggan. It's worn in places, slightly polished from use. That tells you something. This wasn't a one-time idea. It was used, refined, trusted. You continue walking, the toboggan sliding quietly behind you, leaving a faint trail in the snow. The sound is soft, almost soothing, blending into the rhythm of your steps. There's a pattern forming again. Mobility, efficiency, simplicity. Each invention you've encountered so far doesn't just solve a problem, it expands what's possible within that environment. Water, snow, shelter, materials, all connected. You take a slow breath, the cool air filling your lungs, and let it out just as gently. The land stretches ahead, calm and open, holding more quiet ideas waiting to be discovered. And as you walk forward, pulling the toboggan with ease, you realize something simple but powerful. progress doesn't always come from making things more complex. Sometimes it comes from making movement easier.